Okay, we're in case number 5, the second part of World War I, which features a lot of American uniforms once we enter it. Starting over here, Eddie Rickenbacker's uniform. Eddie Rickenbacker, of course, was an aviator with 26 kills. He was also the highest decorated World War I soldier, receiving the Medal of Honor. But this is one of his uniforms. It is also signed inside of the jacket. I do have his robin wings, and I have 2 other signatures of Eddie Rickenbacker. Okay, one of the perhaps the most hardest helmets to find is the Polar Bear Division. The Polar Bear Division was a group of 5,000 National Guard troops that went to Russia to fight the Russians or the Bolsheviks. At the time, the Tsar was having issues. Wilson sent 5,000 troops from Troy, Michigan. However, by the time they got to Siberia, the Tsar and his family were murdered, and it would take them months, if not longer, to fight their way out and get home. This one is painted white with the word Russia on it and the Polar Bear insignia. Another interesting helmet is this one. I doubt if you'll ever see another one. The Ford Motor Company made 2,000 of them. They were sent to France. However, they looked too much like the German helmets, so they were all trash. It's very rare to find one, much less even a photographs of it. It was an experimental helmet designed by Bradford Dean, who loved Greek and Roman history. So you see the look. And this is actually a dog tag maker. You have to physically hammer out every letter into the tag, and that's got to be time consuming, but that's it. Another nice aviation uniform, unfortunately not named. This particular uniform is named to George LeBird. George LeBird was an African American who was in the Buffalo Division, the 94th Infantry. You can see on his jacket the buffalo patch, and I actually have a photograph of him, and there's another one in his pocket of he and his wife later in the years. Now this is a fantastic story about this gentleman here. His name was Charles Dashiell Harris. I bought this picture up in North Georgia. When I bought it, I received a smaller photograph, and it said Charles Dashiell Harris, Company B, 6th Regiment of Engineers, Allied Expeditionary Forces, killed October 20th, 1918. 3 weeks before the war, he was killed. His father was P.C. Harris, the Adjutant General, obviously a man of means. Never seen a photograph that big. Years later, I would buy these maps and these letters in Savannah, Georgia. As I'm reading the maps, they're addressed to a Lieutenant Ragland, who's in Company B, 6th Regiment of Engineers. As I'm going through the letters, I find 3 letters from his father, P.C. Harris, to Ragland. The first couple talking about thanking him on informing about the death of his oldest son. The last, though, the 3rd letter, he writes in 1919 saying the wife and he are going to France to try to find his son's grave, and he's sending Ragland these maps to indicate where his son was mortally wounded and perhaps where the Germans take him to bury him. Fantastic. Now what's the chance of buying this in North Georgia and this in Savannah? They have a connection. That's karma. Now, years later, about 5 years later, a man comes in the museum after the 100th anniversary of World War I. He sees this picture. He comes up to the counter and shows me this on his map, on his phone, excuse me. He tells me he just got back from France, and there's actually a museum. There's actually a museum in France that honors him, and that the French come out and honor him every year, the place of where he was mortally wounded. And the museum talks about how his father comes to France to find his son, and using the maps, and eventually interns him back into their family plot in Princeton. Now that's real good karma. And several months later, a lady comes in the museum and tells me that these letters here belong to her great-great-grandfather, so I took a picture of her and gave her one. But that's an unusual set of circumstances, but a great story. The uniform here belonged to a gentleman, Harold Haskett. He was an artillery officer, and along with his uniforms, I got 2 map cases. One of the map cases I call Life, one is Death. The one with Life talks about books he should read, schools he should attend, poems, writings, things like that. The one marked Death is all his artillery information, his calculations on bombing German cities, the projection of the shells, the layouts of the land. So 2 completely different map cases that reflect 2 different ideologies. So that ends it pretty much for the World War I, and now we'll enter another phase.